one day I was at my grandma's house, and I went into her sewing room, and I saw an envelope under a magazine. It was kind of sticking out, and it looked like the same envelopes that my sister and I had been getting mail from our dad, and it looked very similar. So I pulled it out, and it was a letter to my grandma, but I opened it. And I read in the letter, and it was from my dad to my grandma, and it said in the letter, "I'll be out of jail, and then when I'm out of jail, I'll be back with you and my girls." And I remember just feeling this flush of fear inside my body. And I couldn't believe, I couldn't believe really that my dad was in jail. As a 10-year-old, I mean, it was just incomprehensible to me. And I remember the next thought I had was, he must mean that being in his training school is like being in a jail. So I immediately felt this, I just couldn't, it was just too much for me to take in at that age. So I didn't tell anybody that I'd read the letter. I was so afraid, first of all, that I had read my grandmother's mail. And then that I guess in some way I didn't really want to ask because I didn't really want to know. So I held this inside of me I'd probably say for 3 or 4 months. And my sister and I got into an argument one day. We were out on the driveway, and she and her friend were going up to the drugstore, and she didn't want me to come, so she was calling me all these names, and I got really mad at her. And I just blurted out to her, "I know something you don't know." And she said, "No, you don't, you clod." And I said, "I do. Dad's in jail." And she looked at me and she said, "You're lying." And I said, "I'm not lying. Dad's in jail." And when I blurted that out, I was like stunned that I had said anything, because of course she goes running in the house to go tell Grandma. And the next thing I know, I got called in, and Grandma said, "We need to go in my bedroom and have a talk." My sister was sitting on the bed and she was just sobbing. And my grandma said first of all, she did scold me for reading her mail. And then she said, "I want to tell you girls something, but you can't tell anybody. This is going to be our secret. Can you let me know that you're not going to tell anybody?" And we said, "Yes, Grandma, we won't tell anybody." And she said, "Your dad is in jail." And then I started crying. My sister was already crying. And she said, "Remember, though, you can't tell anybody. And there's something else I need to tell you. You can't tell your dad that you know. It would hurt his feelings if he knew that you knew. He doesn't want you to know that he's in jail. So just keep writing him letters like you were doing and never letting him know that you know." And that was it, all over, said, and done. At least I think that's what my grandma thought. At 10 years old, my trust and my safety were shattered. And that affected me, for decades, my whole life, in that I also realized that these were adults that I trusted. And it was very confusing. I was so confused. I didn't really even know what to do with it. I didn't have the emotional ability to really know how to respond. But how that affected me throughout my whole life was, no one asked me how I felt about my dad being in jail. No one was, I had to keep that big, big secret. And what I learned from that was that I should never speak up. That was the day I lost my voice. Never speak up, especially in relationships. That I should take care of other people's needs and not my own. And that I should hide and keep secrets and pretend that I was okay when I wasn't. Stigma, it's so interesting. That word never came to me, but what I lived through was holding on to that secret, not telling people. And I realize now that there was a lot of shame there. There was a lot of fear, so much fear, because what are people going to think of me if they know my father's in prison? So over the years, I told very few people that my dad was in jail. People really close to me knew. My sister and I, of course, talked about it a lot, and my mom. But there were very few people that knew about my dad being in prison. And that's how I put it into a compartment and was able to manage it. People didn't know. And if they didn't know, then that was protection for me.